Orpheus. Orpheus, the Thracian singer, was the most famous of all the musicians of Greece. Apollo himself had given him his golden harp, and on it he played music of such wondrous power and beauty that rocks, trees, and beasts would follow to hear him. Jason had persuaded Orpheus to accompany the Argonauts when they went to fetch back the golden fleece, for he knew that the perils of the way would be lightened by song. To the sound of his lyre the Argo had floated down to the sea, and he played so sweetly when they passed the rocks of the Sirens that the dreadful monsters sang their most alluring strains in vain. Orpheus wedded the fair nymph Eurydice, whom he loved dearly, and who returned his love. But at their marriage the omens were not favourable. Hymen, the marriage god, came to it with a gloomy countenance, and the wedding torches smoked, and would not give forth a cheerful flame. Indeed, the happiness of Orpheus and Eurydice was to be but short-lived. For as the new-made bride wandered through the woods with the other nymphs, a poisonous serpent stung her heel, and no remedy availed to save her. Orpheus was thrown into most passionate grief at his wife's death. He could not believe that he had lost her forever, but prayed day and night without ceasing to the gods above to restore her to him. When they would not listen, he resolved to make one last effort to win her back. He would go down to the lower world and seek her among the dead, and try whether any prayer or persuasion could move Pluto to restore his beloved. Near Taenarum, in Laconia, was a cave among dark and gloomy rocks, through which led one of the entrances to the lower world. This was the road by which Hercules descended when he went to carry off Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guards the threshold of Pluto. Undaunted by the terrors of the place, Orpheus passed through this gate and down a dark and dismal road to the kingdom of the dead. Here he came in safety through the crowd of ghosts and phantoms. And stood at last before the throne of Pluto and Proserpina. Then he touched the chords of his lyre and chanted these words: "Great lords of the world below the earth, to which all we mortals must one day come, grant me to tell a simple tale and declare unto you the truth. Not to look upon the blackness of Tartarus have I come hither, nor yet to bind in chains the snaky heads on Cerberus. It is my wife I seek. A viper's sting has robbed her of the years that were her due. I should have borne my loss. Indeed, I tried to bear it, but I was overcome by love, a god well known in the world above, and I think not without honour in your kingdom, unless the story of Proserpina's theft be a lying tale. I beseech you, by the realms of the dead, by mighty chaos and the silence of your vast kingdom, revoke the untimely doom of Eurydice. All our lives are forfeit to you. 'Tis but a short delay, and late or soon we all hasten towards one goal. Hither all our footsteps tend. This is our last home. Yours is the sole enduring rule over mankind. She, too, when she shall have lived her allotted term of years, will surely come under your sway. Till then, I implore you, let her be mine. But, if the fates refuse a husband's prayers, I am resolved never to return hence. My death shall give you a double boon." Thus he prayed, and touched his harp in tune with his words. All around him the lifeless ghosts came flocking, and as they heard, they wept. Tantalus forgot his hunger and thirst. Ixion's wheel stood still. The Danaids set aside their leaky urns, and Sisyphus sat on his stone to listen. Never yet had such sweet strains been heard in the world of gloom. Then, for the first time, tears moistened the cheeks of the Furies, and even the king and queen of the dead were moved to pity. They summoned Eurydice, and she came, yet halting from her recent wound. "Take her," says Pluto, "and lead her back to the light. But she must follow you at a distance, nor must you once turn round to look upon her till you have passed beyond these realms, else the boon we grant you will be but vain." A steep path led upward from the realm of darkness, and the way was hard to find through the gloom. In silence Orpheus led on, till the goal was close at hand, and the welcoming light of the upper air began to penetrate the darkness. Then a sudden fear struck his heart. Had Eurydice really followed his steps, or had she turned back, and was all his toil in vain? Torn with anxiety and longing, he turned to gaze on his beloved. Dimly he saw her, but for the last time, for a power she could not resist drew her back. Orpheus stretched out his arms and tried to seize her, but he only clasped the empty air. "Farewell, a last farewell," she murmured, and vanished from his sight. In vain Orpheus tried to follow her. In vain he besought Charon to carry him a second time across the waters of Acheron. 7 days he sat on the further bank without food or drink, nourished by his tears and grief. Then at last he knew that the gods below were pitiless, and full of sorrow he returned to the upper earth. For 3 years he wandered among the mountains of Thrace, finding his only consolation in the music of his lyre, for he shunned all men and women, and would have no bride after Eurydice. One day he sat down to rest on a grassy hill in the sunshine, and played and sang to beguile his sorrow. As he played, the coolness of shady branches seemed all about him, and, looking up, he found himself in the midst of a wood. Oak, poplar, lime, beech, laurel, ash, pine, plane, and maple, and many other trees had gathered together here, drawn from their distant forest homes by the sounds of Orpheus's lyre. Yes, and the beasts and the birds of the field came too, and Orpheus sat in their midst, and sang and played the tunes of sorrow. Suddenly a great noise was heard of laughter and shouting and merrymaking, for this was one of the feasts of Bacchus, and the women were celebrating his rites, wandering over the mountains with dance and revel. When they saw Orpheus, they set up a shout of derision. "See," they cried, "the wretched singer who mocks at women and will have no bride but the dead. Come, let us kill him, and show that no man shall despise us unpunished." With these words they began to throw wands and stones at him, but even the lifeless objects were softened by the music, and fell harmlessly to the ground. Then the women raised a wild shout, and made such a clamour with trumpets and cymbals, that the soft tones of the harp were drowned by the noise. Now at last the shots took effect, and in their fury the women fell upon him, dealing blow on blow. Orpheus fell lifeless to the ground. But he was not to die unwept. The little birds of the forest mourned for him. Even the stony rocks wept. The trees shed their leaves with grief, and the dryads and the naiads tore their hair and put on the garb of sorrow. Only the pitiless revellers knew no remorse. They seized the singer's head and threw it with his lyre into the river Hebrus. There it floated downstream, and, strange to tell, the chords gave forth a lament, and the lifeless tongue uttered words. "Eurydice, Eurydice," it cried, till head and lyre were carried down to the sea and on to Lesbos, the isle of sweet song, where in after years Alcaeus and Sappho tuned afresh the lyre of Orpheus. But the shade of the dead singer went down to Hades, and found entrance at last. Thus Orpheus and Eurydice were reunited, and won in death the bliss that was denied them in life.